sure. All right. Well, hey, Dr. Wright, I'm really glad that you're here with us today.
Well, I'm happy to be here, even if it's virtually.
It's virtual. I tell people it's virtual meetings, but these are real people. Like you're a real person on the other side of that screen. And
Yeah, it's real time.
It's real time. And so I really appreciate what you're doing. Dr. Wright's the director of schools for Wilson County School District here in Wilson County, Tennessee, if you happen to be watching on the World Wide Web somewhere down the road. But she and her team are doing an incredible job and have some incredible challenges. If you don't know, which I'm sure many of you who are listening do know, early in March, really about 4 weeks ago today that we're recording this, we had a tornado come through our community in the late evening, early morning of Tuesday morning, but that devastated many people, many homes, and many businesses, as well as some schools in our community. And now we're dealing with a virus and the threat that it poses to us. And so, Dr. Wright, I just wanted to have a conversation with you about just how you're doing, how the district's doing, how your students and teachers are doing. I know you're very you not only care about the education of your kids, but their welfare, their all of life kind of welfare. So just give us an update on how you're doing and how you are checking the pulse, or how the pulse is beating for the folks in your district.
Thank you, Daryl. And if anything, I'd like to sort of go back a little bit in time, because we are in a unique situation in Wilson County, and no other school district has faced what we have been more or less almost in disbelief that's occurred on March the 3rd. And I do this simply because sometimes you have to put things in context for others to understand, particularly our families, that if you go back to March the 2nd, which was a Monday, matter of fact, and as children and staff and others left on Monday afternoon, they had no idea that that would be the last day in their school building, and not knowing for how long or for whatever reason, because that evening, in the early mornings of March the 3rd, we had two schools that were completely destroyed, for lack of a better term, and we're in the direct path of an EF3 tornado. And the thing that, again, the loss of two schools is really traumatic, but I guess the thing that also, when you sit back and look at it, that had that been 12 hours earlier, you would have had 1,700 plus students and staff that would have been sitting in those classrooms, because there was no warning. I mean, this was one that just literally we were preparing for severe thunderstorms, but we had no warning. For that, thankful, grateful beyond belief. And as I've told many of our parents and even our staff members, that you have to look at this almost like the phases of grief, because I mean, you've got the shock, the disbelief, grief sets in, and then you have that slow period where you slowly transition into anger. And we're in the anger phase right now, and much of it because of what's happening, because no one could have even forecast that we lose the schools, we shut down, trying to get a semblance of what do we do quickly with facing spring break the following week. And we came up with a plan, which caused some anxiety and tension immediately, because we couldn't put them in a Kmart or a warehouse or create portables. But that's the other story. We move into that next phase, that the virus, COVID-19, hits, and it's one of those that, how can this be happening? We're already at a loss with schools. Now we have this virus that everyone started out with thinking, well, maybe it's just a bad case of the flu, and unfortunately, in many parts of the world, we didn't take it very seriously, because it is an adversary, one that we need to pay attention to. So we are now 5 weeks out from March the 3rd. And with that, we are trying our best to not only reach out to every family that has a child in our school district, but also to give reassurances, to do those touch points to make sure, are you okay? Our teachers have done a phenomenal job. And some of them even probably more so with the younger children than any other group. However, if and I heard you say this even earlier, that, the other churches are doing these really neat things. Why are we not doing those neat things? Well, okay, compound that, because people are so tied to social media that they've heard about this school district so-and-so, and they're giving away laptop computers, and they're doing this and doing packets of information, and it sounds good. And that's not to be disparaging in any way, but it's a big difference when you might have only 3,000 or 4,000 students compared to 19,000 and close to 1,500 teachers. But the thing that we don't have so much out on, I guess, in social media is what's happening behind the scenes. And I am proud to say that our teachers have gone out of their way to touch base, but also to reassure and also to provide not only opportunities, but suggestions of where they need to be at this point in time educationally. And we've got a body of resources that are on our website that's divided up by grade bands, plus a lot of fun things too. And then we're also sharing with parents that are now teachers in the classroom, which some of them are loving it and some others are ready to send them back to us if they could figure out how.
Sure.
But the thing is that it's not about teaching new material. It's about reviewing and having fun right now, because our children need that and the adults do too. And so with that, we've got to make sure that, sorry about that, we've got to sort of touch all bases, but this is a community effort, and it's one of those things. I've said this to you. I've said it to some of the other pastors. Jacob Armstrong at Providence, that I don't know how we would have managed to this point without the support, the love, and then the multitude of prayers, not only on our behalf as a body, but down to the granular as far as looking at families and children. And so this is a time that, quite frankly, no one's written a manual. No one can give guidance. There's been tragic events around the country, but nothing to the magnitude of what we are experiencing around the world. And so this is a time that we need to be deep in prayer.
Yeah,
and
we really do.
I'm thankful.
I think, I'm thankful for you. And we're all facing unprecedented, you mentioned this, unprecedented challenges. Like we've never done this before. We're familiar with technology, but we're having to rely on it in ways that we've never had to rely on it before. We're having to keep our distance, which is a bigger deal than we really would would think about when we think about all the ways we serve one another and are engaged with one another. So I'm sure many of us are all of us are living our lives in new rhythms. Mm-hmm. And we all have been to school, and we all know a little bit about the rhythms of school, of school life. But there's a lot of decisions and a lot of challenges that are behind the scenes that we may not be as familiar with. Can you talk to us as we think about how to pray for you and how to serve you and your staff and teachers and students? What are some challenges that you're facing that we may not see as obviously and deal with as intimately as you're having to deal with them now?
I appreciate that. And again, when we think about our own personal worlds, we think about what it's our immediate surroundings. And so when we are having to make decisions, whether it's looking at 1,700 displaced students and where they're going to school, everyone has an opinion, because they can tell me about that empty Kmart that's over on West Main, or they can tell me about we now have empty warehouses, and but it's fine for someone else's child, but not my child. They're just giving suggestions. And they need that we operate under a body of codes and regulations too. You can't just put children just anywhere. And the thing that I guess that we have really had to, we've had to really spend time as far as not only letting parents know that we don't make decisions arbitrarily, impulsively, because we have to look at what's in the best interest of all and not just a few. And that's been difficult trying to communicate that message. When we had a plan within 5 days after the tornado, as far as, because for us, we wanted to get things back to a routine for kids. We wanted to make sure that they were going to be with someone familiar, such as their teacher. And that was really important. And so we crafted a pretty dynamic, if not robust, plan. And the first thing that people started taking apart, many of them were those that were not even tied to either any of the schools, but how can you instruct kids in 4 hours? Well, you'd be surprised. But the thing was, they didn't listen to all of the plan of what we had built into that. So part of it is, giving us, I guess, not only the opportunity, but the allowance that we do know what we're doing. We cannot afford to make mistakes with children. I wouldn't want it for my children, let alone my grandchildren. And that this is something that when we go to bed at night, I can say this personally, it's the first thing on my mind, last thing on my mind, the first thing on my mind when I get up, as far as, am I making the right decision for that child, for all these children? And I take it very seriously to the point that I do get paralyzed sometimes thinking, what if it's not the right decision? And I make no secret, people know about my faith as far as that many times I get a little impatient with the Lord because he's not responding as quickly as I would like him to respond because I've got people waiting. But the thing is that we are also, if we see ourselves in the middle of that, let's say that we have made a mistake, we will fix it. We will rectify it.
Yeah.
But we have great educators. And I mean, there's not going to be something that our children are going to regress because they're not right now. Our teachers are making that effort. And it's just a new world. We have to think different.
Well, we really do. And I think that I'd love on another occasion when we get it later on, just to talk to you about some leadership principles as we lead through crisis. But one of those things is that it's new for everyone. And so crisis is a crisis for a reason, and it's going to be uncomfortable for most everybody. So
and inconvenient, yes.
It's going to be inconvenient. It's not going to be perfect. This is not the way we drew it up. And that's the nature of a crisis. From my perspective, as I try to lead a church and lead my family, we can trust God with those gaps. We really can do that. And the best way we can all do that, no matter where you are on the faith spectrum, is just to put other people first, just to think of other people ahead of yourself and help your kids to think of other people ahead of themselves, and just be patient. Just show a lot of grace. We all need that, and leaders need that. We were talking earlier before we came on, there's a lot of information that most people don't have access to that go into the decisions that we have to make. And so while I think all leaders should be open to constructive criticism and good feedback and so on, we do have to trust each other in the roles that God's given to us, and support and champion, and again live sacrificially, because we all have things that we've got to give up during these times. And when you talk about the tornado and the plan that you created to get kids back into school, I was so encouraged. Obviously, you had to work pretty fast with all that. And now I think about those as the good old days, back just when we were having to figure out where to put 1,700 kids. Now we've got a bunch of kids out of school for a long time. So, well, let's talk about that for just a second. We did lose 2 school buildings in our community.
Mm-hmm.
I think you lost some other structures as well. But what's next for those schools? And then what's next after the what's next? Kind of as you think about for me, I know decision making's daily. Things are changing so quickly, and I know they are for you as well. But in terms of those schools and what you see as a future, what is that for those of us in the county? What does that look like for us?
Well, I can't be really specific because right now, when you look at, we had our insurance companies that were literally on the ground the day of the tornado, and and as with any process, and if you look just at the magnitude of the damage in this county, we certainly weren't the highest priority, and we shouldn't have been, because families need to be at the top of the line. But with it, they quickly did an assessment, and much of what people couldn't see from the road was where the most significant damage. We had a lot of sidewalk engineers that were going by and telling us that they thought they could get us up and running in short time, and they had no idea the magnitude of what we were facing. And particularly Stoner Creek, which is directly behind West Wilson Middle School, significant interior damage where everything just sort of collapsed inside into the building itself. And we have maybe the gymnasium that might be salvageable. That's still questionable. And then West Wilson Middle School, and this is where people look at it from the streets and say, well, you only have one wing gone. No, everything imploded into the building as far as just the sheer pressure of what this storm brought. And then things collapsed from the top. In fact, there was air conditioning units that on top of the roof of West Wilson that did not belong to the school, that came in from, I guess, the neighborhoods across. And again, our neighboring school, Mount Juliet Christian Academy, also suffered significant damage, that much of it not being visible from the road. So from that point, now the assessment's going through, and we already have our design team that's been doing much of the work on all of our schools, because as you know, we've been building a school a year due to the growth. And so they're looking at what would it take to not only rebuild on those two sites, how long it will take, and can two construction sites go simultaneously? And they're believing that they can. So as soon as we get, I guess, the approval to move forward, and we're hoping it's soon, it's going to be the demolition and then the construction. And we're hopeful there. With the design team that we've worked with for years, and then with construction companies that we have a good history with, they're trying to give us assurance that if once they can get on the property, that they can construct two schools with between 14, 15 months, which is phenomenal. Yeah. But they know the urgency because, again, this comes to that inconvenience. Mm-hmm. The plan that we had in place was to get us through the last 9 weeks of school. You know, how would that be? Everyone could live through 9 weeks, which some people, again, didn't pay attention to what we said, 9 weeks. And there was a lot of the rumors and everything that's populated on social media that how dare we even think about that into the next school year. And, you know, it's one of those things I say, ladies and gentlemen, we weren't even thinking about the next school year. We were trying to get through 9 weeks, yeah. Particularly with a lot of things that the pressure on it. So with that, we're now having to go to plan B and C, because we don't know if we're going to be back in school this year. I suspect we will not. The president has already extended it to April the 30th, which our governor had already brought us to April the 24th. So I'm sure that we will line up with that. And then our dismissal for the year was May the 21st. So Daryl, at this point, it'll be a matter of that. If that's the case, then we have time to really look at what we do that with as little inconvenience as possible, but also what's in the best interest of our students as far as making sure that there is no loss of time. And I do know that what's also placed out there, you've got a brand new high school up there that you're getting ready to open, and that's where you need to put elementary and middle school students. Well, here's the thing, and there's been a lot of interesting messages sent to us, but we've already hired staff for that new high school. And there's this thing that happens that when you start filling from the schools that are moving in, you backfill the schools. So we've have a whole hiring process that's been somewhat completed. Everything that's purchased for a high school is already there. And we're talking about a full comprehensive high school. And so we have not only, you know, everything that goes in it, we have the staff hired, we have much of what is needed as far as to launch immediately and to house 1,300 kids, and not counting the ones that we know will come in from summer enrollment. Plus, we've already heard that several of the private schools that had significant damage are already seeking enrollment, and understandably so, and we welcome them. But here's the thing that we also know. As we have time and as things fall in place, we also know that, as I said earlier, there are certain codes and regulations we have to follow, particularly for K-5. There's a reason when you've got pre-K and kindergarten that they have to have not only the rules and regs, but you have to look at furniture, you have to look at playtime, you have to look at things that are very particular and specific to the younger children, as well as go up through the grades. And then middle school, it's the same thing. It's almost, I don't want to say it's a miniature high school, but you're changing classes. There is a lot of more prescribed courses, more so than the younger kids. And with that, there's also more activity. So the thing is that we are already at the drawing board and looking to see what we can do and not compromise in any way education. And here's the thing I also reassure folks. There is a reason why this is an exemplary school district. We have, again, the largest cadre of fine educators I have seen anywhere. Over 85% of our teachers are level 4s and 5s. So there's no mistake or accident that our district is doing as well as it's doing. It's because of our teachers, our educators. And I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to continue that spirit. And so I can assure families, I can assure the community that regardless of where that space might be, education is not going to be compromised in Wilson County because we have top-notch people that care deeply about the children in this county.
We appreciate you taking so much effort and intentionality and making sure that the most important things are the most important things, and that certainly there's a lot of noise and a lot of very caring people care a lot about these issues. So
Yes.
we're grateful for that. But as you think about what impacts the kids the most is the intentional investment of other loving adults in their life, no matter
Yes.
what the space looks like, no matter what the environment looks like exactly. And so I also think, and I know I maybe referred to this earlier, but these may be days that these kids look back on that are the most formative days of their life. That these are difficult days. These are difficult days for their family. These are difficult days for their learning process, but they're the most formative, that they may learn more about themselves and more about what it means to be a part of a community, what it means to sacrifice for others than they ever would otherwise. And so I don't mean to suggest that we're spoiled in any way, but
No, please don't.
but sometimes we may be a little spoiled, and maybe this is some formative. None of us would want to go through it. I'm against pain, frankly. I don't like it at all. But it seems to be something that God seems to use an awful lot in our lives to form.
Well, time will always be measured by the events of this year.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm in my late 60s, and I do not remember a time that, even when I look at the late 60s, the early 70s, which were some really destructive times in our history, I don't know that I've seen anything quite when I look at not only life-changing, but as far as internationally, it's not here, it's everywhere. And so this will mark time for many of us. But I think you're right, because I'm seeing things, particularly from our young people, that not only does it warm your heart, but you sit there and go, we're going to be okay. We are going to be okay. And I remind parents, please model the behavior around your children right now, because they need reassurance, and they're watching everything you do, everything you say. And they need to know it's going to be okay as well, because they're certainly, taking it all in. And I see us coming up with a far kinder generation than what might be the current generation right now.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, let me close out with just this question, and then I'll let you go. But we've seen our community. I know you were with us at a community night at Providence Church, and just after the tornado, and what a wonderful night that was for us and for our community to come together. And so, but the community's risen up in a lot of different ways over the last month now. That's pretty remarkable. What are some ways that people from every sector of our community, whether it's business or education, government, a nonprofit, what are some ways that we can continue to support students and faculty and the work that you and your team are doing going forward? We know that we can't be around each other too much. We've got some limitations there. So as we think about how to serve one another, how can folks serve the schools and the students and faculty?
Well, and up to this point and continuing right now, I cannot say enough, and I'm not able to touch enough people as far as helping us feed and take care of our students. Not only in this county, but we have some coming in from out of county, which we're blessed to serve. And there has been no, reluctance whatsoever as far as what do you need. If it's not just food, what other resources? Particularly families that have not reached out, but we hear that they are in need. All I've had to do is not only reach out to some of our business partners, but the churches. And I think that's the beauty, Daryl, of what's happened, is looking at there is no denomination that is excluded, and it's part of this, I guess, it's more than just community, but how that's working, that if someone's not able to provide it here, they've already contacted someone else and so we are just at the recipients of not the school, but all of our community. And it's been the most, I guess, heartwarming times, that even during hard times, how willing people are to help. And it was, when I look at the group from just out of Mount Juliet that were heading to Watertown to deliver foods and supplies, because they know they didn't have the significant damage, but they had damage nevertheless of people being displaced. And then I watched the Church of Christ and the Baptist Church, and they're all coming together to serve families. So I can't say that there's any need, because everyone's touching base saying, okay, we've done this, what else do we need to do? And I know that we're going to hit some more barriers soon, whether it's trying to get things settled and established prior to school starting again, or whatever it might be. For example, we're sitting on 4 high school graduations.
Yeah.
That going to look like, and we might have to think differently. And I'm also getting questions from seniors wanting, says, can we at least have a prom? Well, if I could figure out, it might be in the high school gym like we used to have years ago, but we're going to take care of those things. But the thing, saying all that which might nonsensical at this time, it's important to kids. And I've had, again, so many people that not only from the business sector, from the chambers, but the churches. What can we do when the time comes when you need us? And it's one of those things I can sit there and think, okay, that's one less stress and pressure, because I know who to reach out to, and I can't say enough. And I don't know that I've ever experienced that anywhere in my professional career as what I'm experiencing here in this county.
Well, I appreciate that, and we are excited about it. And we say this a lot, but for folks who may not know what you and I are talking about, that there's a coalition of churches in this community that we don't all believe exactly the same thing, and we're all Jesus-loving folks, but we don't all believe exactly the same things, but we all care about the same things.
Yes.
And one of those things that we care about so much is our kids and families. And so you and I we share a common interest, and you and your faculty and staff and our churches, we all care about these kids and their future. And so we're excited about the partnership. I just got off the phone today with the folks at United for Hope as we think about our school partnership going forward this fall. There's a lot in motion already for that. So while we're all just leading day to day, we are still thinking 6 months, a year, 3 years out. And so God's still on the throne. He's still working. We've got a future that's really good. And we appreciate you leading the way for our students.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
God bless you.